Hello, Sheridan.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome. I think Sheridan Williams is a friend of mine. I am welcoming here to my podcast first English-speaking guest I have, and I will put up subtitles in Spanish in this episode. How are you, Sheridan?
I'm very good, thanks. Juan, how are you?
I am good. I am also good. Thanks for making an appearance in this podcast, little podcast of mine. I will try my best to speak my best English so you you can understand, and hopefully it's not a detriment. So let's start with briefly introducing you. Your name is Sheridan Williams. You're a Welsh, a person from Wales, in the United Kingdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how old are you?
I'm 29 years old this year.
Okay. Have you lived in Wales all of your life?
Most of my life. When I was about 19 years old, I lived in China for 2 years, where I studied martial arts.
So you studied martial arts in China.
Mm.
That's quite something, yeah?
Yeah.
I have a dear friend of mine who's also currently living in China. But but he doesn't, as far as I know, he doesn't study martial arts. He just lives and works there. So that's funny. So you're 29 years old. You're living in Wales now.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell us, please, what do you do for a living?
So I'm a paramedic, and where I live, it is very, very rural. So, for example, if I have to take a patient to hospital, it's normally possibly a 40-minute drive, maybe over an hour, just to get the patient to hospital. So it can be very challenging.
Yeah. So let us explain basically what a paramedic is for the people who do not know. A paramedic is like a healthcare provider, in the sense of a direct healthcare provider, not a company. You work for a company. You are like the one who rides an ambulance, the one who is in an ambulance to attend medical emergencies. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you do that, and you go, from here and there in the part of the country you are to attend, medical emergencies, and you have to in the moment, try to assess whatever the problem with any patient is, and try to apply your expertise, your knowledge, your studies. To the situation which is specific to whatever is happening there with the person or the people involved in the distress. So I have one thing I have looked up about paramedics is they work in stressful environments. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the patients, the people that I go to, they initially call 999, the emergency services.
Yeah.
So by nature, they normally call when they are in an emergency. So this can be any situation. They could have severe chest pain, breathing difficulties. They may not be very well, maybe unconscious, or may have had a very bad accident. So, for example, yesterday I went to a vehicle collision, and I took that patient to hospital. But what we do, it's a big part of it is just calming our patients down and just being calm.
So that's one thing I have read up lately about paramedics, that they ought to be people with some form of empathy and some form of compassion, to try to calm things down whenever the situation needs that, because as you have just said, and correct me if I'm wrong, most of the time, when accidents happen, there might be the case that severe injuries might be taking place in the patients, but also they are in a state of shock. Is that correct?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, not every one of our calls is an emergency, is the reality of it. But
Yeah.
more than empathy and compassion, we need confidence, because it is confidence that impacts on my patients. And when everyone is terrified and there is an emergency, empathy can only sort of help you so far. It's very good for connecting with patients and sympathizing with their pain and their suffering. But what they need more than anything is someone that's confident, that knows what they're doing, that
All
they
right.
can rely on, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a very good observation. More than empathy and more than compassion, you gotta be like someone confident. How would you explain that kind of confidence? It's kind of a presence. It's kind of saying something. How would you explain that kind of confidence?
You could even describe it as charisma, a sort of
Yeah.
infectious sense of calm.
Mm.
To give a good example of
Wow.
this, there's a famous textbook that was started in the United States called Nancy Caroline's Care on the Streets, and that is considered the paramedic book, the pre-hospital book. And in it, there's a section on maternity and obstetrics, so when a woman's going to give birth or pregnant. And it says in one part of this chapter, in bold letters in a big red box, when in doubt, look confident.
Wow, that's quite a thing to say, quite a thing to put there. And I will look up this book and I will link it to the video description, just so people can find it easily. And say again, please. What is the phrase? When in doubt, look confident.
If in doubt, look confident, yeah.
That's like a sort of oxymoron of sorts, but it's kind of like what is exactly needed, and that's also funny. I have known you for I have never met you personally, but I have talked to you like in the course of like 2 years, something like that, and you can always strike me as a confident person, at least in social media. So maybe that's kind of like translates to your real life situations. So yes, and let me ask you, was there a specific thing that made you become a paramedic? Was it like a calling for you, like a vocation we say here, or is it just about anything else that you would have done in your life to get by?
So, lots of people have asked me, why did you become a paramedic? And the simple fact is that after I returned from China, I did not know what to do with my life. I was very lost. I became very depressed in myself, and I worked some very menial jobs that I absolutely hated. And in fact, one of them gave me so much stress, it gave me an autoimmune disease, which has really caused issues in my life. But
Wow.
because of these things, I sat down with myself and I had a conversation with myself, and I said, what do you want to do with your life? And I started to think, what do I want to do? And the answer was, I want to help people. So then I was just thinking, how can I help people? And I'd like to do something with medicine, with healthcare, and the paramedic role just found itself.
Yeah, so that's quite something, because a lot of us personally, I also fell into sort of lost depression sort of thing in my early 20s as well. I had my issues, the people who know me know about it, but it's a pretty interesting thing, to have come to the realization that you wanted to help people, because what I interpret from a third person perspective, is that you are someone who tried to give meaning to his life, and the way he best thought about that happening was like helping people, because as far as I know, helping others might just be like about the most meaningful thing you can make, like objectively, sort of saying it about. That's an observation I make. Like helping people is very strong in order to provide meaning to one's life. And it's very interesting that you found that in the role of a paramedic or a doctor or whatever, and it's interesting to me. And I wanted to say I am impressed by the people like you. I personally don't believe, at least I could make it myself. Like I think about that sort of stress, and I just think it's not for me. But that's exactly the reason why I admire the people who do hear that calling, and who actually carry out, the training needed in order to be some paramedic and become one and work for. I really admire that kind of person.
So when the COVID epidemic first started, in the UK in particular, there was a big kind of a very popular movement that called all the NHS, which is the National Health Service, which is all health workers, because the health service is nationalised, so it's all free. There was a big popular kind of drive to call all NHS workers, like the paramedics, the doctors, the nurses, heroes. But in the NHS, none of us really liked being called heroes, or at least many of us didn't. Because to me, at least, we're not heroes, we're just doing something that we enjoy, that we're passionate about. So it's not that we're courageous or anything, it's just, we just enjoy it. So for us, it's no extra effort, it's just part of our job.
So you're saying you enjoy being in those sort of, I don't want to say stressful, because you say you enjoy it, but it's kind of like, so you're kind of like driven to do your job. It's not like you feel like you're a hero, or you feel like you're in a situation you don't want to be, but exactly the opposite. It's like some situation you do want to be because you enjoy it. And what I think about that is that it kind of makes you a driven person, and that's an interesting thing, It's like it reminds me of firemen in some sort of way, because they are like somewhat related, that they respond to emergencies, and I have known that firemen usually kind of enjoy, like you just said, the call for an emergency, and actively participate in the solution of the problems, and that's interesting,
But from this, you could describe what I do as work, but I think this is an important life lesson, that I don't consider it work, I just consider it my passion. And when you don't have work, when you have passion, your life is just so much more pleasant.
Yeah,
because
I'm sure that's what it is. It's just very difficult, at least for me, to find the passion in whatever endeavor I am into, whether it be kind of like something I do for a living or whatever. It's like not easy for me to find out that kind of how to put it, commitment to passion. This is sort of like you're connected like to passion, and not to a sense of I have to do this because it's my job, and that sort of thing. You're in a passionate mode, so to speak, instead of feeling like what I think many people do feel like, oh, I'm just working, I'm just serving hamburgers, or fixing this and fixing that, and then I get paid, and then I go to my house and I do whatever. But it's in my opinion not a very common thing to find people who are really passionate about what they do.
Mm.
In our conversations, the ones we have in private form, we talk about physical, kind of like changing the subject here. You want to add something more?
So sort of, if we're talking about health, it's obviously a very, very large subject. So specifically, what would you like to talk about?
No, because what we talk about usually is about the connection between the physical health and the mental fitness, physical fitness and mental health. So to put it, these are like two separate things, but altogether they seem to be intrinsically connected to each other. And at least that I have noticed when we chat, I find that many of our conversations are about these two things, which are physical fitness and the connection with mental health. And I would just like try to, bring up something about those topics. Yeah.
So, if we're talking about sort of mind and body, there is a big difference between Western thinking and Eastern thinking. So, in the West, I find there's a very disjointed, disembodied idea that the two things are separate, that the one doesn't necessarily interact with the other as much. And what I find is the Western way of thinking, it's very cold and analytical, and I do find the whole scientific method in general, it misses a lot of what we are as human beings and what encompasses health as well. Because a lot of what we are as people and human beings, it can't necessarily be recorded. And this, I find, is where Eastern thinking comes in. Because if you consider modern psychiatry and the actual treatment of mental illnesses in the West, it hasn't worked very well for the past 100 years. It's worked horrifically. They haven't got it right. And it was only when they started to take Eastern ideas into Western psychiatry that they started making breakthroughs in mental health. And the reason is because in the East, they combine mind and body together to create a whole holistic person.
Wow.
And what you will find is the two are very interconnected as well. So there are so many avenues I can go down with this. But one example, as we sort of previously discussed, is psychoneuroimmunology. The idea that your mind interacts with your immune system. Your mind and your brain actually connects with how you deal with viruses and how your body heals and this kind of thing. And if you want to look at some well-researched connections between mind and body, all you have to do is look into the placebo effect. And when you look into the placebo effect, you get this huge psychosocial connection between the mind and the body. For example, in pain management, there's been studies where, for example, people have been given morphine and its antidote called naloxone. So morphine is a very strong painkiller, and to reverse it, to stop it from happening, you can give naloxone. So in these studies, they gave a patient some pain, and then they gave them morphine, for example, and they found the morphine helped. But in another example, they gave a placebo, so saline, salt water, instead of morphine, and they found they had the same improvement in pain.
Yes.
And equally, from that position, they also gave two groups. One, they gave naloxone to stop the pain, and to bring back the pain, and stop the morphine from working. And in the other group, they gave them, again, another placebo. And they found, again, that the placebo worked as well as the naloxone in bringing back the pain and stopping the morphine from working. So the power of just talking to someone, it's very, very deeply ingrained in us as human beings. And that's something that we in the West don't necessarily appreciate enough. And I believe that is the reason why our societies are so sick now. I consider Western culture a sort of a sick culture, to be honest, because it's just so detrimental to our mental health. And when you have such high rates of depression and anxiety, that then affects your physical health as well. So, for example, in depressed patients, they found that the rate of healing a wound was actually longer than a healthy and more mentally well-established patient. And in very anxious patients as well, to give you a specific example, for students in university, they took blood tests when they were due to go for an exam, and they found that before the exam they had more antibodies, a stronger immune system, than during the exam or just before the exam. So while they were stressed and anxious, they were actually more susceptible to illnesses. And this is just acute, just a short-term anxiety. The long-term effects of anxiety and depression, they wreak havoc on your body. And these are pieces of literature that in the West, they're sort of hidden, because if they were more in the limelight, then essentially pharmaceutical companies and lots of medical services would start to lose too much money, because positive good health, it's for example, doctors don't really tell you how to be healthy, they just try and cure disease. So how you become healthy in yourself, it's an internal practice. Or, for example, it's with good social structures, so a good loving family, supportive family, people that appreciate you and alleviate this anxiety and depression and make you feel good about yourself. And of course, so for example, if you have a loving family, you're hugging, you have a good emotional connection, your immune system boosts and you're releasing endorphins, your natural painkillers, and you find all these health issues, they will reduce when you have a good social structure, good social connection. When you have positive friends, it impacts your health as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. How you connected all these things, and about the thing that you have talked about is psychoneuroimmunology, which is the field of medicine that tries to connect both this three things. It's the psychological, the neurological, which is like the psychiatry thing you were talking about, and also the endocrine system, which is the autoimmune system in your body, and how these three things connect, and just about a wonderful way to put all those things connect and explain what psychoneuroimmunology is in just about a 2-minute speech that you just did. You've touched about a lot of subjects. You've touched psychiatry, you've touched about Western civilization in regards to health, and Eastern civilization in regards to health, and how there seems to be a big difference, and how Western civilization seems like very analytical, very rational, but also not integrated. And that's something you drew from Eastern civilization, Eastern culture, and how they in the East seem to have a holistic approach to health, and how it is maybe working out better. I don't know about exactly the health statistics of Eastern civilizations, but I'm sure that this particular thing you say about a holistic approach being better than a purely rational approach is true. And I also like to give it a mention for the thing you said about how the whole system in the West is constructed around, this kind of sort of like, so you have a headache, take this pill, and that's the only thing that the doctor will tell you, and that's the only thing that you will go home to, a pill or a set of pills. In any case, like over the course of months, years, you have like several different ailments, and also take this another one pill, this another one, and you end up, basically being kind of a slave to the whole pharmaceutical system. And that's a very interesting thing to look up, the big pharma sort of theory, and how big pharma can exist, because it is also it trickles down the values of the money makers, which is the people who are stakeholders of those companies, how those values about maximizing economic output, it trickles down to the very foundation of medicine, and how it kind of corrupts it in a sort of way that you don't get any doctor telling you do this and that, maybe eat healthier, have healthier habits, stop doing this, stop doing that. As the way you said it, I think it's like you go to the doctor and they prescribe you this and that pill, and you go home, and there ends the treatment, basically. It's a lot of topics, but it's those are fascinating to me.
So for me, for example, I used to suffer with very bad headaches. So basically, they are tension type headaches, which means the muscles in the back of my head would just tighten up really badly, and it would get worse and worse. And the only thing that would help was ibuprofen, an analgesia painkiller, and I would feel the pain move from the back to the forehead to the eyes, and then I'd be crippled with nausea, and I'd feel like I wanted to vomit. But there was a trigger to this every time, and that was stress. And I would find that if I got stressed, I would get this tension headache. And all the doctor would say was, take painkillers. But as I've delved into this problem myself, I've tried massaging my neck and releasing the tension in the muscles, which has really helped sometimes. And as I go deeper down into the issue, I've uncovered issues with my own stress and anxiety. So again, I have this physical issue which a doctor is regarding as purely physical, but in reality, it's a mental issue that's deeply ingrained in my very being. And it's only after many years that I've been dealing with these issues and working on relaxation techniques. But these are things that pharmaceutical companies won't help with. They can't help with. Because to relieve stress, you can take psychotropic drugs, antidepressants, but the reality is having senses of loneliness and depression, all the things that result from essentially civilization and the disconnection between each other and natural ways of living, these are the things that are harming us. So in many ways, so for example, most days I go for a walk in the woods in nature and I feel more relaxed, but big companies cannot make money out of that, so they don't encourage it, so they don't do the research. And this is where Western academics and science fails, because if they don't want to do the research because it's not going to be profitable, it won't be done. So we are missing out on so many positive things for our health because they're not profitable. Exactly.
If it isn't a way of, sorry to interrupt you. If it isn't a way to make money out of it, it just won't get through out in the message to the public, to the population, and it actually turns out to be a very crucial thing for health.
So when we're going back to how I was talking about Western psychiatry and how it's only benefited from Eastern influence, you can consider the pharmaceutical intervention to mental health issues in the 70s and 80s as just give this individual drugs, lithium, horrible things like that, and they never worked. But it's only now that we're practicing mindfulness and meditation and cognitive behavioral therapy that we're actually able to control this crippling anxiety and depression. So it goes to these things are not profitable, but drugs are.
Yeah, that's kind of like a very hard thing to accept. That we're kind of like in the middle of a system that seems kind of like unable to help you, but also it would probably take years, if not decades and centuries, to reverse this tendency, sort of thing, and apply all of the Eastern kinds of things of culture that would help integrate the medicine as the medical field as we know it. It's kind of like a tough thing to realize, because people like us, our age, and our elders, and also maybe people way younger than us, realizing that they are kind of like stuck with this kind of approach to health and medicine, and it's kind of disheartening in some sort of way. And
because sort of one thing I've noticed about our society nowadays in general is because we are so bombarded with information and messages and so much expectation about us, we've almost relinquished our responsibility for ourselves. So many people, they go to a health professional and they call me out, for example, and they want me to fix them. But it's not as simple as that. You have to take the responsibility yourself to make the changes the necessary to fix your life. There's no pill or drug that you can just take to get rid of depression. And last year I spent maybe 6 months on antidepressants myself, and after on my second consultation with my doctor, I'd done some research, and I said to my doctor, so I've read up about these antidepressants, and I can see they change the neurotransmitters in my brain to make me feel differently. But I said to him, so I can see it kind of numbs me, but am I right in thinking that it doesn't change the neural connections in your brain? So theoretically, if I was to come off the antidepressants now, would I be the same? And basically the answer is yes. And the answer would still be yes a year from now, 2 years from now, if I didn't make the life changes, because it's in making life changes that the neural connections in your brain, they change, they reshape themselves. So the things that were making me depressed, they've now changed. So it's a different way of thinking.
So it's the neural pathways that actually have to change, and you do that. You actually achieve that changing of the neural pathways in your brain and the connections between your neurons by actually taking responsibility and taking full responsibility or a lot of more responsibility, and actively trying to change your outward kind of life that would also affect the later on. If you successfully do that, it will help changing the neural pathways, and that sort of thing is what really matters to cure depression, instead of taking numbing pills. that will only, by themselves, only, reduce the pain at most. So if you really need a cure, specifically speaking about anything, especially depression or some sort of mental illness, it should be only a palliative or something you take for a limited amount of time, but you also, merge that thing with actively trying to change your behavior in life.
So, an example I can give of that, let's say you have an accident, and you're bedbound. You're in a lot of pain, but your doctor's telling you you have to move, you have to get your joints working, your muscles moving, your body working. The reality is that if you don't move, if you don't get your muscles working, they will atrophy, the muscles will shrink and they will die. And in doing nothing, you become smaller and you can move less. But if you keep on moving, let's say you take painkillers to help you move, so we're comparing that with antidepressants. We're moving forwards, we're learning how to use our muscles again, and what we'll find is the pain actually reduces because we are using the muscles, and our pain threshold is reducing because we are becoming used to it, and our muscles are becoming more used to it. And it's a positive yeah, so you keep on moving forwards and you keep on moving forwards. So you positively move the wheel over and over. And what you'll find is, like a broken bone, you break it, but if you keep on using it, keep on strengthening it, it will grow back stronger. So specifically for, say, depression, for example, you can be very depressed and you start taking antidepressants and it numbs you. But unless you are doing exercise, going out to see friends, you are not creating the new neural connections that you need to beat that depression. So the more you exercise, the more you feel good about yourself, the more you enjoy the endorphins flooding your body, it creates a positive cascade. So after 6 months of doing very rigorous exercise, that will be a very rich endorphin run, endorphin flood that enters your body. So in future, if you come off antidepressants and you've done all this exercise, your neural connections will change and your endocrine system will change. So when you feel depressed in future, you will go for a run, you will run further, and you will have more endorphins, which will help you manage the depression more and more. And the more things you do in your life, like exercise, doing things you are passionate about, positive hobbies, positive social interactions and structures, positive mental attitudes like CBT and meditation, the better you can control this depression and control your life better.
So let me try to narrow this down a little bit. You say basically that by trying to attack, so to speak, the physical aspect of your life, the physical lethargy, trying to become physically active and force your body, exert your body, try to make it release forcefully the endorphins, which are, like you said in the beginning of the episode, you said they are the natural painkillers of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And you attack, kind of like the flanks of the system, which is your body. You attack the physical part, attack it. By attack, I mean address, the issues like force your body, exert your body, and by doing that, you can affect your psychological being, and also you can mix a little bit of physical with mental therapy. So it's sort of like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and other sorts of things like meditation and mindfulness, the practice of those things. And you can, make all those things roll in a positive direction and help you, achieve, I don't know how these terms are in medicine, but achieve the cure, achieve the solution you're looking for of your health overall, and it will be like sort of like attacking one aspect can positively impact the psychological, and then the autoimmune system will reset, or so to say, and it will just overall help you have a generalized better state of health.
Mm. That's more or less it. Yeah. The word I was thinking about is a positive feedback loop. So as you keep on creating these positive things, it creates more and more positive things, and you eventually cascade, and it's just everything sort of helps. But there's no single way to beat mental illness, is the thing. So you can't just put all your money, so to speak, on a pill. You have to do this and this and this and this. You have to make big lifestyle changes. But if you think of mental illness more generally, more holistically, and I tend to see this to my patients a lot, even in regards to physical illnesses. If there is something wrong with your body, it is your body communicating to you that something is wrong. And if something's wrong, it's telling you need to change. So when we're talking about things like mental illness, depression, anxiety, it's telling you that something in your life is wrong. Something in your life is not healthy for you, and you need to change it.
It's let me correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of like an alarm that you kind of must, if you take life seriously, of course, be able to like pay attention to those kind of alarms, signs that life gives you in the form of, hey, like I'm trying to give an example here. Like I used to be able to do this and now I'm not, like physical something, or this part of my body hurts now and it usually didn't. What is the cause? The part of actually trying to seek out what are the causes of your pain and what are the things that are in play organically in your body, trying to listen to those sorts of alarms and signs, and try to respond to them in an active way, and not rely upon some pill that your doctor, gives to you. So it's a kind of sorry.
There is a condition, a medical condition. It's very rare, but some people are not born with pain receptors. And initially, you might think no one feels pain. That sounds wonderful, but the reality of these patients is that because they can't feel pain, they wreak havoc on their body. They break bones easily, and they are very, very prone to injury and death. So it kind of shows that pain it's like you say, it's an alarm bell. It's telling us something. It's communicating. And if we compare that with mental health and psychological attitudes, we can also talk about stoicism, the very act of using sort of psychological pain and adversity to our benefit, so we can learn something from it. Or if it's something unpleasant in our lives, we can change it. But either way, this pain, this discomfort is always teaching us something about ourselves. And what I feel about much of modern life is we are taught that pain should be avoided, but the reality is that pain is something that can be learnt from, that can help you grow. It is communicating to you.
Usually also it cannot be avoided, the psychological pain. And usually if you actually run from it, in a psychological way, you escape from the issue, you don't address it psychologically, it usually comes back with more strength, the pain. And there's some point that will be reached in that case that you won't be able to run from. And you're saying that it's not that we have to run from these things, but we actually have to kind of like embrace them and try to find a way to use them in our favor and as a tool for growth.
So, personally, the most stoic thing I have done was become a paramedic, because I tend to think of myself as the kind of personality that is least suited to being a paramedic, because I'm a very quiet, cerebral person, and on the outside I might look like I'm confident, but inside I'm terrified. I'm just a little boy screaming, scared. But when I initially decided to become a paramedic, one of the questions I asked myself was, what job or career would make me grow the most as a person? And it was becoming a paramedic. So the confident person you described today, that comes across as confident, that was because I challenged myself and I wanted to be something more. I didn't want to be this scared, nervous little boy anymore. And it's through that process, that challenge, that I've gained self-respect and self-esteem, and that I can actually use this compassion, and people trust me, and they look to me for help when they're in emergency. And it's because I've taken on this stoic attitude, because I want to be better in myself, essentially. As the Buddhist philosophy would say, I'm trying to avoid suffering by embracing it.
So that's actually a Buddhist teaching, you know. It's interesting. So you chose, you know, in some sort of way, the path less transited, but also the path that goes against the grain. That's the way you say it in English. Going against the grain, and that's kind of like actually the path for personal improvement in a way that it will turn you from, you know, a scared child, as you put it, into a grown-up man, into someone who's confident, someone who has self-esteem, you know, healthy self-esteem, and someone who people come to, who people rely on, in order to get, you know, their inspiration or their health better again, and that's very, very interesting.
So, kind of moving on there, I wanted to also talk about basically what I consider the most fundamental part of health, and that is the ego. And the way I describe the ego, it's to use a metaphor, it's like the way we see the world as it truly is through our eyes, but our ego, the way we truly see the world, is through glasses. And everyone's glasses is different, and this perception, it changes. So, for example, the ego, it's me, the ego. It's a defense system that's built in order to interact with the world that's most effective. But in modern life, it doesn't work very well. So, for example, you can consider racism. It's a disorder of the ego. So, for example, I'm wearing these racist glasses, and I see the world, but whenever I see, say, a black or an Asian person, in through the glasses, I see a red mark, I see danger, I see something to be avoided, and this distorts reality. This is what the ego is. And in regards to something like depression, the ego says to itself, I am special, I am worthless, I am no good at this, everyone hates me. This is the view that we paint for ourselves. So when we have the glasses of depression, we look in the mirror and we see everything for the way it is, but we see ourselves as loathsome, horrible creatures. But if we were to take off these glasses, we would see ourselves for what we are. And I find that most disorders, they are resulting from the ego. So we've talked about how mental health interacts with the immune system and your well-being in so many ways. But I've also kind of mentioned that depression is the result of the ego. So if we look farther back at our very perception of the world, then we can also cure these physical aspects by changing the way we think, the way our mind works. At a very fundamental level, we can our perception actually changes the way our cells work. And I'm just going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but you can apply quantum physics to this. Because in quantum physics, you have, for example, Schrodinger's cat. And it's the assumption that something does not occur without it being observed first. So regarding that, the way you actually, an organic creature, you and I, we can observe something, and at a microscopic level, by observing it, we can actually change the way it works. So imagine that. The way you think in your mind, the way you view yourself, the way you view everything around you, the way you view your life, just this viewing, it is actually changing yourself at a microscopic level.
So that's spectacular. That's very, very interesting to me. So you've said about quantum physics, for those who don't know, in the act of observing something, the thing actually changes its output, its result. And that's sort of like the way you try to make this sort of observation of yourself or of your ego from some sort of an outside perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, and the act of trying to observe yourself from this outside third-person perspective actually has a lot of impact, because I think we all do it. We all, whether we know it or not, we see ourselves and we judge ourselves all the time, and we say to ourselves, we are this and that, we are better than this, we are better, worse than that, and in the particular observations we make about ourselves, we do actually all the time change whatever it is we really are, which is kind of like it will be pretty much invisible to ourselves, what we really are. And we have this, we might have like the sort of lenses of depression, as you said, the glasses of depression, which is a self-narrative, a narrative about ourselves that we have constructed, telling ourselves we are loathsome creatures, we don't deserve anything, this and that, and that sort of like act of observing ourselves in such a perspective, from such a perspective, in such a way, in such a diminishing way, it actually turns us into unhealthy individuals, no? And perpetuates the depression.
So, for example, I can recommend a book that talks about this, because I'll talk about meditation next. This book is called Evolving Beyond Thought by Gary Weber. And in the book, he talks about the ego, and essentially what meditation is, it's a dampening of the ego.
Dampening of the ego.
So to actually reduce the ego, to get rid of it. And this is essentially what Zen Buddhism is. It's about getting rid of the ego, and you get that through meditation, essentially. And so, for example, one of the things I've become obsessed with is yoga. It's all about slow movements, controlling your breathing, being at one with your mind. And it was from this book that I discovered that yoga was created as a meditation. Because essentially what meditation does is it stops the conscious thoughts. So basically, I more or less consider the conscious thoughts, the thoughts that are always going around in your head, to be your ego. Because the unconscious thoughts, they don't tell you that I'm not worth this, nobody loves me. It's the thoughts in your head that tell you that. And according to the book explains that maybe 5 to 10% of your brain's working is the conscious thought. 90 to 95% of what your brain does, it's unconscious. We are not aware of it. So you can kind of attach this awareness, this conscious thought, to the ego. And in order to get rid of the ego, we practice meditation, we practice mindfulness, we control our thoughts. So essentially what you have is the thoughts that are so obsessive, they are pathological. And if you consider insomnia, for example, not being able to sleep, all you have to do is a quick Google search and you find so many people saying, I can't stop thinking. I just can't get to sleep, my thoughts are racing. That again tells me that thoughts, they're not helpful. The conscious thoughts that we're thinking about, they are pathological. And I think that is where the ego comes in. And by stopping ourselves from thinking, we are creating healthy minds. It's something I've been practicing in my yoga, and I have felt a lot better for it in myself. So essentially what I'm sort of talking about is the idea that, well, in this book, kind of the subtitle, you'll like this, it's called Updating Your Brain Software. And the idea is that your brain, the way you're thinking, it's software. And the depression, the anxiety, these are outdated, virus-infected, malicious software-infected pieces of software. And these thoughts, they're the viruses, the pop-ups that come up on our screen. And by updating your system, by creating the antivirus and reducing our thoughts, we can actually become healthier. So you're on your computer, you've got pop-ups everywhere. This is your brain telling you you're worthless, you're not loved, and all this stuff. And essentially, if you get rid of that, it's just gone. That's all there is to it.
It will be gone.
Yeah.
So let me try to again chew this down. Your thoughts would be your conscious part of yourself, and that would be sort of 10% of your brain activity or your ego overall, or that would be your ego alone. That 10% would be your ego, and that if you want to try to reduce, as you said, dampening the ego, which is not exactly to get rid of the whole of it, but try to dampen it so much that it is unheard and it doesn't produce any negative noise, so to speak, by suppressing your thoughts or your thinking, and all this together with practicing yoga, which is the physical form of meditation in a way, the way I understand you just put it, or at least yoga helps the physical part of the meditative processes in yourself. And with all these things, you have the tools with yoga, you have the tools with meditation, you have the tools with trying to reduce your thinking and your conscious being and your ego to get rid of your ego, or at least dampening it so much that it doesn't hurt you.
That's more or less it.
I usually try to chew the things that I am told down in sort of a way that the people who listen to this kind of like in tune with my mental processes, would understand better in case they did not understand whatever it is that the other person in front of them would be saying.
Yeah, I mean, the things I'm talking about, they're so widespread and broad and complicated sometimes. Sometimes I do wonder if people can understand me.
No, yes. I mean, it is really something very, very complex, and you do actually talk about a lot of things at a time, and it can be really hard to follow. I mean, for other people, maybe I kind of like know you for a while, so maybe I understand you better. So that's why it doesn't, it absolutely rings every bell when you say this and that. But maybe for some people, they might get lost. So then I just try to like reword whatever you just said in sort of a way that people listening to this book will understand. It's communication issues.
Yeah.
But really, it's a very objectively speaking. I think it's a very complex matter. We're talking about a lot of different things that intertwine, and usually I think that about health, being something very, very complex.
So I'm sort of moving on from there regarding health. I've just finished reading a book called The Body Says No by Gaber Mate, and it's a very good book. It's all about exactly the physical conditions that the mind creates. And in the book, it discusses things like how personality can affect your health, and how different, believe it or not, personality traits actually almost create medical conditions. And for example, it's difficult to remember them, but there are a number of autoimmune diseases particularly, which it's not really academic or scientific knowledge, but it's clinical knowledge that these conditions have a certain personality tied to them. And going through the book, it's talking about conditions like multiple sclerosis and cancer, for example. And in the book, the author talks about patients he's met and famous people who have had these conditions, Alzheimer's disease as well. And he goes into the histories of these people, and they've all got very serious emotional issues. And he's done a lot of research which does suggest that emotional dysregulation and an inability to regulate, to express your emotions, and not receiving enough emotions as a child, it creates the psychological pathways to actually create disease in your body, in the physical side of you.
So it cascades from childhood. It cascades from childhood, the emotional part of your being at a very young age. It will later on produce certain personality traits and personality disarrangements. And those disarrangements will later on, it is found out, I think you said it is not like a formal study, but it is like...
They are qualitative studies, if anything. So on the individual person, it's detailed.
So it's like from childhood to developing certain personality characteristics to later on in life, at whatever point, developing certain physiological illnesses, and that's what you just said. And it's a very, very interesting for me, at least. Really, it's it.
So as I've been kind of reading the book, a lot of things have started to make sense, and I've been considering all my knowledge on psychoneuroimmunology and mental health and the ego and meditation and everything, and I've come to some kind of conclusions in myself. In my own health has improved as well, actually. So for example, recently I've been going to a therapist that does something called mind-body scanning, I think it's called. And the idea is that you collect physical ailments in your body, and they're rooted in emotional problems. So they ask you to basically relax and sit there, and you just mentally scan your body. You look for feelings of discomfort or tension and all this kind of stuff. And as I've been talking to my therapist, I've been finding areas of tension in my body. And the strange thing is, as I've been thinking about these areas and the discomfort, I've had memories and emotions crop up, specifically from my childhood, and I've had some very sort of profound episodes where I've realised actually I'm repressing a lot of anger, and I've kind of come to peace with that, and I've begun to understand why I repress these things, and I understand that I should release them more, and I become more at peace in myself, and I feel more confident, more healthy. I can see it in the social relationships around me. I generally have people enjoy my company more because I'm more at ease with myself. And like I was saying before about the tension headaches, I've had a lot of sort of emotional repression in my life. And as I've become more emotionally expressive, more emotionally intelligent, I've been able to better manage the physical discomfort in my body. And whereas before I would always have to stretch and move, and I was generally restless and couldn't sleep, now I can sit here relaxed, no problem. It's a big change in my life, really.
Also, it's this kind of therapy that you're receiving by your therapist, and you're not only receiving it, but actually participating in it, because that's therapy. And you're describing how it made you, address emotional issues first, and as you were emotionally addressing those issues, you discovered that you had like pain in your body, or uh, certain conditions, like it might be like what you said about your neck hurting, your tension in your neck. That's what sort of tensions in your body that are actually intrinsically connected with the emotional aspects that went unaddressed all throughout your life, and until now that you are actually addressing them, and you're actually trying to, you're actually achieving the cure, or the cure of those things that are kind of like both mind and body intrinsically connected.
And essentially, you are right, it is a cure, because for example, during the therapy session, I went through some memories, because when I was very young, my stepfather, he had a motorbike accident, and he became paralysed from approximately here down, so he's constantly in a wheelchair. And from that age on, from when I was maybe 6 years old, my mother had to look after him full time. So from the age of 6, I had to look after myself. And as I became older, I also had to look after my parents as well. And again, it's a general theme in this book that because I had to look after myself, because I wasn't allowed to express emotions such as anger and frustration, because it would have no positive impact in my family, because it would hurt me, I repressed these emotions. And in the book, the body says no, a number of conditions are caused, well, for example, you look into the childhood of these people with these conditions, and they have similar circumstances as me, that they've grown up having to look after their whole family. They had parents that weren't emotionally there, and all these emotional issues. It's so closely ingrained with the psychological that it does create physical manifestations of health issues, essentially.
Well, that's quite an interesting thing, that our bodies and our minds are so intrinsically connected, and that across different people, different situations, same situations or similar situations in different people, I guess from different cultures and all of that, it just produces about the same or similar physical manifestations, as I said. It is all due to emotions and the psychological aspect of a person.
So if we sort of look more into emotions, and the ego in particular, so for example, we can consider ourselves, if we do believe in evolution, as science would have us believe, then we are all related to other mammals. And you can consider any animal, like a dog, for example, and you can think of a dog, and you ask yourself, does this dog have any thoughts? And probably not. The dog doesn't have an ego, it just has emotions. And one thing I believe we need to connect more with in the West is our emotions, because essentially emotions are how we interpret and understand the world. Again, when we're going back to our conscious thoughts, that is the 10%. The reality is that the 90%, that is emotions, that is instinct, that is feelings, that is our animalistic nature. And if we're thinking about ego as well, then the very aspect of thinking that we are more important, we are better than animals, it's an issue of the ego.
Yeah,
It's something we need to get rid of.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've had this feeling early in my 20s, as I was like discovering things about myself and life in general, that we're so like, well, I think that, to put it in a sentence, in a single sentence, we have more things alike animals, in common with animals, than we have differences with them. And because we, at least maybe some sort of another issue about the Western civilization or Western culture, or maybe it's about humanity in general. But what I'm trying to say is, we are taught to believe that we are, how do you say, we have a different kind of dignity, and this is the word they use, at least in schools, to explain the difference of importance, so to speak, between humans and pretty much anything else. And it kind of, in my view, it creates a disconnect of what we really are, which are just about everything animals are, but with a little bit of aggregate, which is our intelligence, our self-consciousness, or, but I think that in the act of differentiating ourselves from anything else, especially from animals, we are creating this disconnect, and we are undermining our integral understanding of our beings, which is that as long as we are, as much as we are this part of our beings that are our ego, our thoughts, our thinking, our conscious being, we are, so to put it, 90% the same as pure emotion that we found in animals.
So hopefully you can kind of see how the ego is beginning to make itself known, because the example I gave with depression, it's our ego that says we are unique, we are this, 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 and this. In the same regard, it is our ego saying animals are less than us. You can apply it to anything. Again, to racism, you're saying this colour person is less than I am special, I deserve more. Or I'm more intelligent than this person, I am special. It's this constant, I am special, that is the ego. And that's what needs to go to become healthy.
Yeah, that's the way I see it is kind of something along the lines of what you said. It's like a sickness of the ego. It's like I see the ego personally as something that we all have and we exist with, especially as humans, and it always keeps on telling us, in order to maybe persist, in a dangerous environment, which is the world. I have to protect myself at all costs. And I see a dog there, I see a tiger over there, and that is bad, and I am good, and I must persist. I must keep my life, and I must maybe actually kill the animal, or stay away from the animal, and not to convey different kinds of races with animals. That's a thing that can be taken out of context. I didn't think it through, but not I mean it in a way, of course, because that's not the way I think. But we just about anything that's not us. We have this very animalistic impulse to say, this thing over here that is not part of myself and it has like autonomy, I must either, eliminate it or stay away from it. And in a subtle way, it transpires as racism, for example, in societies, and also, the kind of idea that we are absolutely radically different from animals, and we actually are, or to put it in a way, we have more things in common with them that we have different from them.
So we can actually go back to the start of our conversation now when we're talking about compassion, and how you were saying compassion and helping others makes you feel good. I mean, if your ego is telling you this group of people or these types of people are not worthy of my compassion, then you are not going to benefit from being with those people. But if you open your mind, you can even open your mind to yourself. You can be compassionate to yourself, and you actually create happiness through compassion. So again, by getting rid of the ego, by instead of saying we are different, we just say we are the same. Then you're able to use compassion, and you create these positive feelings in yourself.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a reciprocal kind of attitude. To be able to, have this compassion, it can make you able to become happy or happier as a person. That's kind of like the positive feedback wheel. Right, Sheridan, we are we are about almost 2 hours in. An hour and 40 minutes in my clock. It's been really a wonderful podcast, a wonderful episode, conversation overall. I didn't have just as long as these conversations, and maybe not even as deep. But what I'm trying to say is this was really impactful for me on a personal level, and I'm sure this is interesting objectively. There's a lot of things that we can be taken out from this, and specifically from you, who you are an expert in these fields. I think you're in the path to becoming. I don't want to say now, but maybe in 5 to 10 years time, I can definitely see you some sort of thing like writing a book about it, or talking about this for general public. I really do see you that way. And overall, thank you very much for being here, for being part of this podcast. And what I want to say is it really has been an honor, up to an honor, because we are different cultures, different languages, very far distance in the world, and still you have accepted my proposal to have this kind of conversation. And I want to say you just excelled at the amount of and the quality of information you have given here and presented here.
Thanks. It's been a really good podcast, actually. I've enjoyed myself.
Yeah. I really feel so. And
but I'm not an expert. I just enjoy talking about these things.
Just because you don't have a title in your forefront that is expert doesn't mean, in my view, that you aren't. So don't observe yourself in that sort of perspective and put you down. Don't throw yourself under the bus. Okay, so Sheridan Williams, dear friend of mine, I hope in some future I get to visit you, or you get to visit me, and then have a couple of beers or coffee. And I really thank you a lot for being here.
It's been good. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
It was really good, man.
Yeah, it was fun.